Empire of Bricks, Chapter 1. The house I let her hate. My wife left me on a Tuesday evening, while I was unclogging the garbage disposal. That was the part that would have embarrassed her most, not the betrayal. Not the suitcase waiting by the stairs. Not the diamond bracelet I had never seen before flashing on her wrist while she explained, with theatrical sadness, that our life had become too small for her. Lena Lang would have hated the setting. The kitchen light was too yellow. The sink smelled faintly of lemon soap and old coffee grounds. I was wearing rolled-up sleeves, my tie loosened, my forearms wet, one hand buried beneath the rubber flaps of a disposal unit that had been making a grinding sound since Sunday. It was exactly the kind of ordinary domestic scene she had grown to despise. "Victor," she said behind me. I did not turn around right away. There is a certain tone a person uses when she has rehearsed destruction in front of a mirror. Soft, controlled, almost merciful. I had heard it in boardrooms from men about to fire loyal employees. I had heard it from developers before walking away from debt. I had heard it from politicians before stabbing donors in the back while smiling for cameras. And now, I heard it from my wife. I pulled my hand from the sink, wiped it slowly on a towel, and turned. Lena stood at the entrance to the kitchen in a cream colored coat I had paid for but never mentioned. Her hair was styled in loose waves around her face. Her makeup was perfect in that careful way that meant she wanted to look wounded, not guilty. Behind her, near the staircase, sat two suitcases, not one, two. That detail mattered. One suitcase means anger. One suitcase means impulse. One suitcase means a woman expects to be chased. Two suitcases mean planning. "I am leaving," she said. I looked at the bags, then at her. "For how long?" Her mouth tightened. She hated when I asked plain questions. Plain questions ruined drama. Plain questions forced truth to stand up without music. For good. I nodded once. The disposal gave one final metallic clink behind me, as though the house itself had dropped something into place. "With Tony," I said. Her expression changed. Only slightly, but I saw it. The smallest flare of surprise. A flicker in the eyes. A tightening at the jaw. Lena had expected tears, confusion, maybe suspicion. She had not expected certainty. "Tony understands me," she said. There it was, the first line from the script. Tony understands me. Tony sees my talent. Tony believes in my dreams. I studied her. The cream coat, the new bracelet, the confidence, the anger she had polished until it looked like courage. "How long?" I asked. Her face hardened. "Does it matter?" "Yes." She looked away first. 6 months. A lie? It had been 9. The first hotel dinner had been 9 months and 12 days earlier, at a restaurant called Ember and Stone, where Tony ordered a bottle of wine that cost more than his weekly payroll and paid with a corporate card issued by one of my shell companies. I had the receipt. I had the security footage. I had the time-stamped photo of Tony placing his hand over Lena's on the table, while she laughed in a way she had not laughed with me in years. But I only nodded. 6 months, I said. She seemed relieved that I accepted it. Tony isn't afraid of more. I had heard all of it before she ever said it. Not because I read her diary. Not because I bugged her phone. Not because I needed to. People who think they are special almost always betray in ordinary ways. Tony Reyes was 44 years old. Broad, shouldered, sun-browned, and loud in the way contractors become when clients mistake volume for confidence. He wore expensive boots he could not afford, drove a black pickup financed under a business name already bleeding cash, and called every building he touched a game changer. He had first come into our lives as one of my clients. At least, that was what Lena believed to her. I was Victor Lang, property manager, a decent man, reliable, boring, the kind of husband who knew which boiler made noise at the Westbrook complex, which tenant had 3 unpaid months, which landlord wanted new carpet installed before showing a unit. I carried keys. I answered calls. I inspected gutters. I talked to plumbers. I kept a modest office with metal filing cabinets and a coffee machine that burned everything after noon. That was the man Lena thought she had married. She never knew that the office building where I worked was owned by me. So were the apartment complexes. So were the shopping centers. So were the warehouses, storage facilities, medical plazas, industrial parks, mixed, used developments, parking structures, and hotel shells spread across 31 states under layered partnerships, trusts, REIT positions, private debt instruments, and anonymous LLCs with names so bland no journalist had ever bothered chasing them. Lang Commercial Group did not exist on paper as one empire. That was the point. A tower casts a shadow. A maze does not. I learned that from my father, who died with paint under his nails and 37 rental units no one knew belonged to him. Never stand on top of what you own, he told me once, when I was 16 and sweeping sawdust from a duplex hallway. Stand underneath it. Foundations last longer than flags. So I built foundations, quietly, patiently, brick by brick. And Lena spent 15 years thinking I was a man who had settled for a salary. She looked around the kitchen now with contempt she did not bother hiding. This house, she said, shaking her head. This life, Victor, I can't breathe in it anymore. I almost smiled. The house had 4 bedrooms, oak floors, a garden she never touched, and no mortgage. But compared to the fantasy Tony had promised her, it must have looked like a prison. What did he promise you? I asked. She lifted her chin. A future. Specific. Her eyes sharpened. A business. Renovations. Design. Build projects. High-end residential. Boutique commercial. Something with vision. She stepped farther into the kitchen, gathering confidence as she spoke. He believes I am wasted here. He says I should have been designing hotels, restaurants, luxury homes. He says I've spent years shrinking myself so you could feel comfortable. There it was, the second line. I dried my hands carefully. And what do you say? I say he's right. The words landed softly, not because she held back, because I did not give them anywhere to land. She wanted impact. She wanted me to stagger. Instead, I folded the towel and placed it beside the sink. You think I made you small? You didn't make me anything, she said. That's the problem. The guilty always feel generous when a lie goes unchallenged. I didn't plan for this to happen, she said. That was the third line. No one ever does, I replied. Her brows pulled together. For the first time, irritation cracked the softness. You are doing that thing? What thing? Acting like you are above everything, like nothing touches you. I looked at her suitcase again. Something touched me. It simply did not move my face. There is a difference. When I was young, before money, before steel, before I learned how zoning boards could be persuaded and banks could be starved, my father taught me a lesson with a brick. He placed it in my hands one winter morning behind a half-finished laundromat. Hold it out, he said. I was 12. I held the brick straight in front of me. At first, it was nothing. A few pounds of clay, rough edges, cold dust. I rolled my eyes, thinking I had understood the lesson before he finished teaching it. Then 1 minute passed, then 3, then 5. My shoulder burned. My wrist trembled. My breath shortened. Pain isn't weight, my father said. Pain is time. I dropped the brick at 7 minutes. He made me pick it up again. That lesson built my empire. Not intelligence. Not luck. Not boldness time. Anyone can swing a hammer. Few can hold a brick until the other man breaks. Lena mistook silence for weakness because she had never understood time. Tony mistook access for success because he had never understood ownership. And both of them were about to learn the difference. Say something, Lena demanded. I met her eyes. Do you love him? She blinked. That was not the question she wanted. She wanted accusations, insults, desperation. Something she could use later to make herself the brave woman who escaped an emotionally unavailable husband. Instead, I asked about love. Her lips parted, then closed. I love who I am with him. That answer told me everything. She did not love Tony. She loved the reflection he held up for her. A grander Lena, a chosen Lena. A Lena finally discovered by a man with dirt on his boots and borrowed money in his mouth. I nodded. Then you should go. For the first time she looked uncertain. What? You packed? He's waiting, I assume. She stared at me. I walked past her into the hall. The suitcases were expensive, Italian leather, not her usual luggage. Tony had bought them. Then, or rather, Tony had used money from a contract I had fed him to buy luggage for my wife so she could leave me. There was almost poetry in it. I picked up the larger suitcase. Lena followed quickly. Victor, what are you doing? Helping. I don't need you to. I know. I carried the suitcase to the front door. Outside, the evening had settled into a blue-gray quiet. The sprinklers clicked across the lawn. A black pickup idled at the curb with its headlights off. Tony, of course, he had not come to the door. Men like Tony loved claiming women publicly after other men had done the private work of being husbands. But confrontation, eye contact, standing under porch light while a betrayed man looked him over. That required a spine. Tony stayed in the truck. I set the suitcase on the porch. Lena stood behind me. For a moment, neither of us moved. The house breathed around us. 15 years. That was what she was walking out of. 15 years of birthdays, dinners, quiet mornings, flu medicine, hotel rooms, missed flights, arguments, Christmas lights, taxes, funerals, grocery lists, and the small, unglamorous kindnesses that keep a life from collapsing under its own ordinary weight. She remembered none of it. Or worse, she remembered, and had decided none of it counted. I didn't want to hurt you, she said. I turned toward her. Yes, you did. Her face went pale. I did not raise my voice. That made it worse. You wanted me hurt enough to prove this mattered, I said. You wanted pain as evidence of your value. That's not fair. I looked past her toward Tony's truck. It isn't. Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. Lena was too disciplined to cry before the exit. You'll understand someday, she whispered. That almost made me laugh. Instead, I opened the door wider. I already do. She studied me, searching for the crack. She found nothing. So she took the smaller suitcase herself, walked down the porch steps, and crossed the lawn toward Tony's truck. Tony finally stepped out. He was wearing a dark jacket over a white shirt open at the collar. The kind of outfit men choose when trying to look casual and rich at the same time. He glanced at me once, quickly, then looked away. Victor, he called. I said nothing. His confidence wavered. Lena reached him. He took her suitcase, placed one hand possessively at the small of her back, and guided her toward the passenger side. There it was, the gesture, the claim. A small public touch designed for me. A lesser man would have charged down the steps. A louder man would have shouted. A wounded man would have given Tony the scene he needed. I simply stood on the porch and watched. Tony opened her door. Lena paused before getting in. She looked back at the house, then at me. Maybe she expected me to break then. Maybe she wanted one last plea. Maybe some part of her needed me to make the choice harder. I gave her nothing. She got in. Tony shut the door. The truck pulled away from the curb and rolled down the street, carrying my wife, her luggage, and Tony's borrowed courage into the dark. I watched until the taillights disappeared. Then I went back inside and finished fixing the garbage disposal. It took 11 minutes. A peach pit had jammed the blades. Afterward, I washed my hands, changed my shirt, and went into the room Lena had always called my sad little office. She was wrong about that too. The office in our house did look sad, I admit. A narrow room at the back, one window, old desk, shelves full of property binders, a printer that jammed if fed more than 10 pages at a time. Lena hated it. She called it depressing. She once said it smelled like dust and unpaid ambition. I never corrected her. I sat at the desk and turned on the computer. The old monitor flickered awake. First, the ordinary screen. Then, after 2 passwords, a biometric key, and a rotating encrypted token, the mask fell away. Maps bloomed across the monitor. Satellite imagery, parcel overlays, ownership chains, debt exposure, permit status, contractor assignments, tenant roles, pending acquisitions. Every property Tony Reyes had touched in the last 3 years appeared as a constellation of red, gold, and white markers across the screen. I leaned back. There he was, Tony Reyes Construction, a small company with recent explosive growth, currently attached to 26 active projects, 8 pending bids, 4 private renovation contracts, 2 mixed-use redevelopment proposals, and 1 flagship project he had been bragging about for months. The Meridian Yard, 12 acres of industrial land outside the city, slated for conversion into luxury lofts, retail space, restaurants, and boutique offices. Tony thought Meridian Yard would make him. Lena thought it would make her. The public-facing development entity was called Harborline Renewal Partners. Tony believed Harborline was owned by a group of investors from Denver. It was not. Harborline Renewal Partners was owned by Westbridge Urban Capital. Westbridge Urban Capital was controlled by Dunmere Holdings. Dunmere Holdings was a subsidiary of a Delaware structure that answered to a trust administered through a family office in Nevada. The trust belonged to me. Tony's big break was mine. So was his second big break, and his third, and the luxury restaurant renovation where Lena first saw his name on a polished proposal deck, and the boutique hotel lobby where she received her first independent design commission, and the downtown penthouse remodel she called the turning point of her career. All of it. Every job Lena thought proved she was finally being recognized had come through my empire. Not because she lacked talent. She had talent. That was the part that made the betrayal almost impressive. Lena could see space before other people understood it. She knew how light should fall across stone, where texture could soften steel, how a lobby could make strangers slow down without knowing why. She had taste, discipline, instinct, but talent is not the same as opportunity. Early in our marriage, I watched her struggle for clients who praised her portfolio and hired someone louder. I watched her come home from meetings smiling bravely, then sit in the bathtub for an hour with the door locked. I watched her confidence erode one polite rejection at a time. So I made calls, not as Victor Lang, husband, as procurement consultants, as project managers, as regional partners, as anonymous recommendation chains, as clients who had heard wonderful things about her from someone she never met. I never gave her fake work. I gave her doors. She walked through those doors herself, but she believed the doors appeared because the world had finally noticed her. Maybe that was my mistake. I thought love meant building the road and letting her believe she had found it. Perhaps love without truth becomes architecture without foundation. Beautiful until wait arrives. I opened the Meridian Yard file. A 3D rendering filled the screen. Lena's fingerprints were all over it. Warm brick facades, arched warehouse windows, black steel balconies, courtyard trees, restaurant patios under string lights, a restored smokestack preserved as historical character. Tony's name appeared on the construction proposal. Lena's appeared under interior concept design, both names side by side, Reyes and Lang design. Build she had already used my name. That was interesting. Not Lena Reyes, not Lena Vale, not even Lena Hart, her maiden name, Lang. The name she had just abandoned still had value when printed on investor decks. I zoomed in on the ownership layer beneath the project. The land was still under option. Tony had not closed. He thought the option period gave him control. It did not. An option is a promise with an expiration date. Ownership is a fist. I opened another window and typed 3 words into the internal acquisition channel. Proceed on Meridian. Within 14 seconds, a reply appeared from Claire Mercer. Full acquisition or pressure position. Claire was my general counsel, fixer, strategist, and the only person alive who knew the full map of my holdings. She had once described herself as a librarian for loaded guns. I typed, full, quiet, accelerated, use Northgate Vale. No connection to Harborline. A pause. Then, understood. Personal. I stared at the word, personal. People think business is clean because money has numbers on it. But money is never clean. Money remembers hands. It remembers hunger. It remembers insult. It remembers who laughed when the check cleared. I typed, yes. Claire's reply came slower this time. Then I assume restraint is optional. For the first time that evening, I smiled. Restraint is design. Claire, not mercy. Her response. I'll prepare the board package. There was no board, not really. There were directors, managers, trustees, officers, signatories, and advisors, scattered across entities like chess pieces. Some knew pieces of the structure. None knew the whole board. I was the board. I opened Tony's contractor profile. Cash position, weak. Equipment debt, high. Payroll stress, moderate and rising. Insurance renewal, pending. Lien exposure, manageable. Personal guarantees, extensive. That last line mattered. Tony had personally guaranteed more than he should have because men like Tony believed confidence could substitute for capital. I opened Lena's file next. Joint accounts, standard, personal savings, modest, Business formation, pending. Trademark filing, Reyes and Lang Interiors. Lease applications, 2 commercial spaces. Equipment financing inquiry, private residence search. There it was. A property on Stonehaven Ridge, 6 bedrooms, glass walls, pool. View of the valley. Listed at $3.08 million. Tony and Lena had toured it 3 days earlier. I pulled up the showing record. Lena had spent 47 minutes inside. Tony had spent 12 minutes on the terrace making calls. The listing agent had described the couple as highly motivated. Cash influx expected after Meridian closing. Cash influx expected after Meridian closing. I closed the file. Then I opened one more. The agreement. The forgotten document Lena had signed 11 years earlier after insisting she wanted to be more involved in our property ventures. At the time, she had been offended that so many assets stood in my name or under entities she did not understand. Not because she wanted responsibility, because she wanted recognition. So I gave her recognition. A partnership agreement for a small cluster of residential properties, later amended through 3 holding companies tied to design, related projects and personal asset protections. She signed it after 2 glasses of wine and a bored conversation with an attorney she barely listened to. Lena remembered the agreement as proof that I trusted her. She forgot the clause infidelity, fraudulent concealment, asset diversion, breach of marital fiduciary duty. Any one of those triggered automatic reversion of voting control and beneficial ownership interest across all jointly held project entities and associated real property. People call those clauses cruel. I call them weatherproofing. You do not build in storm country without drainage. I printed the clause. The old printer groaned, clicked, and slowly pushed out the page. I lifted it while still warm. There was Lena's signature, elegant, confident, a little heart tucked into the loop of the L. I remembered the night she signed it. She had kissed my cheek and said, "Now we're really partners." I had believed her. That was the dangerous thing. For all my caution, all my structures, all my hidden vaults and layered companies, I had believed my wife, not blindly, but enough. Enough to let her mock the modest house. Enough to let her complain about the old office. Enough to let her call my job dead. And enough to let her feel superior to the very life that protected her. Enough to let Tony Reyes mistake my silence for vacancy. I placed the page on the desk and looked at her signature until the ink blurred in the lamplight. Then I picked up my phone and called Claire. She answered on the second ring. "I am already moving on Meridian," she said. "Good. Do you want the contractor cut off immediately? Number a pause?" "No," she asked. "Number keep feeding him. Victor." There was warning in her voice. Claire had seen me handle enemies before. She knew I preferred pressure over impact. Impact creates sympathy. Pressure creates confession. "He needs to rise," I said. "How high? High enough that the fall educates everyone watching?" Claire exhaled softly. "And Lena?" I looked toward the hallway. For years, her frame design sketches had hung there, 3 of them. She had taken 2. The empty spaces remained on the wall, pale rectangles where sunlight had not touched paint. "Lena gets exactly what she asked for," I said. "Freedom, number." I folded the printed clause once. "Visibility," Claire understood. "She doesn't know about the trigger? She forgot? That's not the same thing?" "No," I said. "It's worse." Claire was quiet for a moment. Then her professional voice returned. "I'll need documentation of the affair. You'll have it by morning. Photos, communications, financial ties, hotel records, if possible." I said you'll have it. "Understood." Another pause. "Victor, may I speak plainly?" "You always do. You built parts of her career. If this becomes public, that will surface. I know. She may argue control, manipulation, financial coercion. She may. And your response?" "My response is ownership documents, payment records, signed agreements, and the fact that I never prevented her from leaving." Claire gave a small, humorless laugh. "Number. You just owned every road after she walked out." I looked again at the satellite map. Tony's active project sites glowed like candles waiting to be snuffed. "Not every road," I said, "only the ones she chose." After the call ended, I sat in the dark office for a long time. The house was quiet, in a way it had never been quiet before. Marriage has a sound. Even unhappy marriage. A hairdryer behind a bathroom door. Shoes dropped by the stairs. Cabinet hinges. Television voices from another room. A sigh from a hallway. The clink of a spoon against a mug. When those sounds vanish, silence does not feel peaceful. It feels staged. I walked through each room. Not emotionally, not sentimentally. I inspected. That is what I do when something breaks. In the living room, Lena had taken the silver, framed wedding photo, but left the nail in the wall. In the bedroom, she had emptied half the closet with surgical precision. Dresses gone, shoes gone, jewelry case gone, perfume gone. She left the robe I bought her in Venice because she said it made her look old. In the bathroom, her drawer was bare except for one broken lipstick and a hotel sewing kit. In the guest room, she had opened the storage closet and taken 3 portfolio boxes. She had planned. Again, I respected that. Weak betrayals are sloppy. Strong betrayals have logistics. But Lena had made one mistake. She thought planning an escape was the same as planning a future. A future requires supply lines. And every supply line Tony had ran through me. At midnight, the first report arrived. Tony and Lena had checked into the Bellwether Hotel downtown, penthouse suite, booked under Tony's company card. The Bellwether was one of mine. Of course it was. I owned it through a hospitality trust that had acquired distressed boutique hotels after the pandemic, renovated them quietly, and installed management teams trained never to ask why certain guests were flagged for premium service. The suite had been upgraded automatically because Tony Reyes Construction was tagged as a valued vendor. My valued vendor. The irony sat on my tongue like smoke. A second message came from Claire. Meridian seller receptive. Northgate offer prepared at 14% above Tony's option. Adjusted implied value. Closing pressure. Tax urgency. We can secure before his financing window. I replied. Do it. Third message. Zoning contact confirms Reyes inquiry on East Bank parcels. We can complicate utilities review. Proceed. Fourth. Commercial lease app found for Reyes and Lang design. Build. Landlord is Crestwell Retail Holdings. Yours. I stared at that one, then typed, approve lease. Favorable terms. Personal guarantees required. Claire replied almost instantly. You want them in? I want them comfortable. Comfort is the velvet lining inside a trap. By 1 a.m, my screen had become a war table. Not war in the loud sense. No soldiers, no blood, no shouting. Just parcels, permits, debt, clauses, signatures, dates. The real violence of civilization is paperwork. A bulldozer can destroy a wall. A document can destroy the right to rebuild it. I opened a live satellite feed of Meridian Yard. 12 acres under moonlight. Broken asphalt, rusting warehouses. Chain link fencing. Weeds growing through cracks. To most people, it looked abandoned. To Tony, it looked like destiny. To Lena, reinvention. To me, inventory. I zoomed in until the central warehouse filled the screen. This was where the groundbreaking would happen. I knew Tony. He would need a ceremony. Men without substance. Love ceremonies, hard hats, branded shovels, banners. Local press, smiling investors. A speech about community revitalization. Lena beside him in white or cream, glowing as the creative force behind the project. He would stand where he thought his empire began. That was where I would end it. Not yet. Timing mattered. Pain is time. I closed the laptop just before dawn. For the first time since Lena left, exhaustion touched me. Not grief. Not yet. Grief would come later, perhaps. Grief is patient. It waits until the work is done. I went upstairs, showered, dressed, and made coffee. At 7:12 a.m. my phone rang. Lena. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Yes? Her voice sounded different. Brighter, but strained. Victor. I poured coffee into my cup. Good morning. She hesitated. I wanted to check on you. No, you didn't. Silence, then a sharp breath. I am trying to be kind. You are trying to confirm damage. That's cruel. Accurate. She lowered her voice. Tony thinks I shouldn't call you. Tony is right. That stung her. I heard it. I don't want this to become ugly, she said. It already is. I mean legally. There it was. Now we had reached the useful part of the conversation. "Have you spoken to an attorney?" I asked. "Not yet." Another lie, she had spoken to one yesterday at 3:40 a.m. p.m. A family law attorney named Mara Ellison, whose office leased space in a building owned by a company that owed me a favor. "I think we can be adults," Lena continued. "We don't have children. Tea here is no reason to punish each other." "Punish? I know you are hurt. I am not discussing divorce terms with you over the phone." "I don't want your money, Victor." That almost made me close my eyes. People who say they do not want money are usually preparing to ask for a specific kind. "I just want what's fair," she said. "Of course. And I want my business assets protected." There it was. Our joint creative investments, she corrected quickly. "The project's connected to my design work." I drank my coffee. She still did not understand. "You should have your attorney contact mine," I said. "Victor, please don't be cold. You left warm behind." A long silence followed. When she spoke again, the softness was gone. "You know, this is exactly why I left." "No," I said. "You left because Tony made failure sound glamorous." She inhaled sharply. "You don't know anything about him." I looked at Tony's cash flow report on my desk. "I know enough. He's building something real." "No," I said quietly. "He's standing on scaffolding." "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means be careful where you put your weight." She hung up. I set the phone down and looked out the kitchen window. The sun had risen over the garden. Lena's rose bushes needed trimming. She had planted them 2 summers ago after seeing similar ones outside a Napa resort. For 6 weeks, she cared for them obsessively. Then the novelty faded, and the gardener took over. That was Lena's pattern. She loved beginnings. The sketch, the reveal, the first compliment, the photograph before anyone sat on the furniture. Maintenance bored her. Foundations bored her. Rent rolls, insurance, drainage, easements, tax exposure, labor delays, supply contracts, tenant improvements, HVAC failures. Those were the invisible bones beneath every beautiful space. Tony bored her less because Tony had not yet shown her the bones. He showed her renderings. I would show her load, bearing truth. At 8:03 a.m. I drove to work. Not to the glass tower downtown where my family office occupied 3 unmarked floors behind a private elevator. To the modest property management office Lena hated. The receptionist, Maria, looked up as I entered. "Morning, Mr. Lang." "Morning." She studied me for half a second too long. Maria knew Lena. Everyone did. Lena had come in occasionally, always overdressed for the building, smiling with the mild pity of a woman visiting a place beneath her. "You okay?" Maria asked. Yes, she did not believe me, but she respected the answer. My office smelled like coffee and paper. On my desk sat a maintenance request from apartment 14B, a roof inspection estimate, and a tenant complaint about parking. I handled all 3. That may sound strange. A man whose wife had left him the night before. A man with the power to crush the contractor who took her. A man quietly acquiring millions in land before lunch. And there I was approving roof sealant. But that is how empires survive. Not through revenge. Through systems. Even hatred must wait behind cash flow. At 10:30 a.m., Tony called. I had expected him sooner. I let Maria put him through. "Victor," Tony said, voice too hearty. "Hey man, got a minute?" "Man," I leaned back in my chair. "For you? Of course." He laughed once falsely. "Look, I know things are probably awkward, probably. I just wanted to say, this wasn't planned. People kept offering me that sentence like a receipt. Wasn't it? Number, I mean? Feelings happened? Lena's an incredible woman." "She is." That surprised him. "Yeah, right, she is. And I respect you. I do." "No, you don't." Silence. Then Tony's voice hardened slightly. "I am trying to handle this decent. By calling me from a hotel suite billed to your company?" The silence changed shape. "How did you, Tony?" I said his name softly. "Do not insult me by pretending you are careful." He breathed into the phone. When he spoke again, the false friendliness was gone. "Okay, fine. You are angry. I get it." "No, you don't. I didn't call to fight." "Then why did you call?" He hesitated. There it was, the real reason pushing through pride, Some of our current projects overlap with properties you manage. I don't want personal issues interfering with business." I smiled. Tony was not calling to apologize. He was calling to protect his pipeline. Smart enough to worry, not smart enough to know why. "My personal life has never interfered with business," I said. Good. That's good to hear," he exhaled, relieved too quickly. "Because Meridian is huge for us, for Lena too. She's got real vision, Victor. I know. I mean, I don't think you ever really saw it. There it was. The mistake." He could not resist. A man like Tony cannot simply take another man's wife. He has to explain why she was wasted before he arrived. I looked at the framed certificate on my wall from the State Apartment Association. Property Manager of the Year, 12 years ago. Lena had laughed when I brought it home. Tony continued, gaining confidence from my silence. "She needs someone who pushes bigger, no offense." "None taken. Really?" "Number," he laughed again, uncertain. "Well, I appreciate you being professional, Tony." "Yeah? Enjoy Meridian." A pause. "We will." "I know." I hung up. By noon, Northgate's offer on Meridian Yard had been accepted verbally. By 2:15 a.m., the seller's attorney requested expedited closing documents. By 4:40 a.m., Tony's financing broker sent an irritated email asking why the seller had gone quiet. By 5:55 a.m., Lena posted a photo online. I did not follow her. I did not need to. The post came through my monitoring feed. A picture of her hand holding a champagne flute beside Tony's on a hotel balcony. Caption: "Sometimes the life you were meant for begins when you finally stop apologizing for wanting more." Wanting more. I sat alone in my sad little office and read those words twice. Then I saved the post to the evidence file. Not because I needed it legally. Because someday, when Lena asked when the destruction truly began, I wanted the answer preserved. It did not begin when she left. It did not begin when Tony touched her hand. It did not begin with the hotel, or the lies, or the suitcase. It began with that sentence, wanting more, because I had given Lena more for 15 years, quietly, invisibly, without demanding gratitude, and she mistook invisible for absent. That was the wound. Not that she loved another man. Love fails. Desire wanders. People disappoint each other in ways both tragic and ordinary. The wound was that she looked at the foundation beneath her feet and called it a cage, so I decided to remove it, brick by brick. That evening, I drove to Meridian Yard. No driver, no security, just me in the same gray sedan Lena used to say made me look like an insurance adjuster. The gate chain was locked, but the lock belonged to Harbor Line, which meant it belonged to me. I opened it and stepped inside. The air smelled of rust, weeds, and old rain. In the distance, traffic hummed beyond the industrial lots. The city skyline glowed faintly, all glass and ambition. I walked across cracked pavement toward the place where Tony planned to break ground. Someone had already placed survey flags in the dirt pink, blue, white, tiny little claims fluttering in the wind. I crouched and touched one. A flag is not ownership. A rendering is not a building. A promise is not a deed. I stood and looked over the yard. In my mind, I could already see the ceremony. Tony smiling under a hard hat, Lena glowing beside him, investors clapping, cameras raised, a banner stretched behind them. Reyes and Lang Design. Build presents Meridian Yard. My name beside his. My wife beside him. My land beneath both. I laughed then, not loudly. Just once, the sound disappeared into the empty yard. Then my phone buzzed. Claire. Meridian purchase agreement executed. Closing scheduled. Tony not notified yet by seller. I typed back. Good. Another message came. Do you want me to slow his other payments now? I looked across the weeds toward the old warehouse. No, I said aloud, though she could not hear me. Then I typed, release pending payments, approve new bids, encourage expansion. Claire responded. That increases exposure, his exposure. And Lena's? I watched a loose sheet of metal on the warehouse roof tremble in the wind, especially Lena's for a full minute. No reply came. Then understood. Building the cage. I looked at the survey flags again. No, I thought. Not building, revealing. The cage had already been built by vanity, by greed, by contempt. By every moment, Lena chose fantasy over fact. I was simply turning on the lights. I left Meridian after dark, before locking the gate. I took one last look back. The land waited. Land always waits. People rush across it, dreaming, lying, promising, betraying. They draw lines, file permits, raise walls, hang chandeliers, cut ribbons. But land is patient. Land remembers who owns it. And soon, so would Lena. Everyone has a story. Some are about love. Some are about betrayal. And some are about the moment a quiet person finally stopped being underestimated. Welcome to Vengeance Narratives, where revenge is intelligent, psychological, and unforgettable. If you've lived through betrayal, humiliation, deception, or silent heartbreak, share your story with us. Your experience could inspire the next gripping narrative, because the most dangerous stories are the true ones. Subscribe, like, and share. It will help our channel grow. Chapter 2. The men who thought they were building. Tony Reyes did not rise by accident. That was the first thing Lena never understood. She looked at him and saw momentum. She saw confidence. She saw a man finally taking action while I, in her mind, shuffled leases and answered calls about broken water heaters. But Tony's rise had been engineered. By me, not because I admired him, because I test people the way builders test soil. You do not pour a foundation on ground you have not bored into. You drill, you sample, you measure compression, water table, weakness, shift. The surface tells you nothing. Grass can grow over rot. A parking lot can hide a sinkhole. So when Tony first crossed my orbit 3 years earlier, I tested him. He had come recommended by a regional supervisor who liked his speed. Tony could move crews fast. He could charm inspectors. He could make small clients believe delays were acts of God, and upgrades were acts of generosity. He knew how to speak to money without sounding poor. Useful qualities. Dangerous ones, too. I gave him a minor job first. A strip mall facade in Glendale. Simple exterior work. Paint. Stone veneer. Signage coordination. Lighting replacement. Nothing glamorous. He finished 2 weeks early and 3% under budget. Then he overbilled for materials by 9%. Not enough to be obvious. Enough to be character. I let it pass. The second job was a tenant improvement for a medical office. He delivered polished work, shook hands with the doctors, smiled for photos, then quietly billed change orders. He had verbally discouraged them from documenting. Again, not sloppy, strategic. By the fourth job, I knew what Tony Reyes was. Not a fool that mattered. Fools make noise. Fools trip over their own shoelaces and blame gravity. Tony was something more useful and more dangerous. A climber with appetite and no reverence for the ladder. Men like that can be used if you keep them hungry. So I fed him carefully. A restaurant renovation here. A boutique lobby there. A warehouse conversion in another state under a client entity that never connected back to me. His company grew. His truck improved. His watch improved. His shirts began fitting tighter because he wanted people to see he had become the kind of man who did not sit at desks. Then came Lena. At first, I thought she disliked him. She called him too much after their first meeting. Said he smelled like cedar cologne and ego. Said he talked over women, but watched them too closely when they spoke. I should have listened to that. Disgust is often attraction before it admits itself. By their third shared project, she was defending him. He's rough, she told me one night, standing barefoot in our kitchen with wine in her hand. But he gets things done. So does a crowbar, I said. She rolled her eyes. You always do that. What? We're deuce people? I did not tell her that I had spent months expanding Tony, giving him rooms he had not earned, putting his name in front of people who believed recommendations meant trust instead of leverage. Lena mistook my silence for judgment. She always did. Now, sitting in my office, the morning after I bought the land beneath Tony's dream, I opened the old contractor evaluation files one by one and watched his rise like time-lapse footage of a controlled fire. Tony's first invoice to one of my companies, $18,400. His latest pending draw request, $1.02 million. That kind of growth changes a man. It does not create arrogance. It reveals how much arrogance was waiting for funding. At 9:20 a.m., Claire called. Meridian seller signed the exclusivity amendment, she said. Good. Tony's broker is furious. He'll survive. Temporarily. I could hear pages moving on her end. Here is more. Reyes and Lang submitted lease revisions for the Crestwell space. They want early access before deposit clearance. Give it to them. Victor, give it to them. That space is 16,000 square feet. Build-out alone will bury them if cash flow slips. Yes, she stopped arguing. That was one of Claire's virtues. She warned once, maybe twice, then executed perfectly. Do you want the landlord side friendly? Very welcoming, flexible, encouraging, predatory kindness, professional courtesy. Of course, she said dryly. Also, Lena's attorney requested preliminary financial disclosures from your divorce counsel. She has a right to ask. What do you want disclosed? The truth. Claire went quiet. The visible truth, I added. There it is. Property manager salary, retirement accounts, the house, standard bank accounts, personal vehicles. Nothing inaccurate. And the empire? The empire is not marital property under those disclosures. That will be contested. Let them, Claire's voice sharpened. If she discovers scale too early, she may pull back from Tony. She may try reconciliation. I looked at the Meridian purchase packet on my desk. Number, you sound certain. I am, because Lena does not want me. She wants the life she thinks I denied her. Once she sees I had it all along, she won't feel love. She'll feel humiliation. Claire said nothing. I continued. And humiliation doesn't bring people home. It makes them sue. That's why I drink, Claire muttered. Despite everything, I smiled. After we hung up, I spent the next several hours doing what people never see in revenge stories. Accounting. There is no poetry in spreadsheets, but there is power. I reviewed Tony's active projects and divided them into categories. Projects to preserve because innocent tenants depended on completion. Projects to delay because Tony had overextended labor. Projects to reroute through competing contractors once Tony defaulted. Projects to let him finish, so the payments could fatten his confidence. That last category was crucial. A trap cannot feel like a trap while the door is still open. Tony needed applause. Lena needed validation. They needed to believe the universe itself had rewarded them for stepping over me, so I gave them victory. For 6 weeks, their lives improved, from the outside anyway. Their leased office opened with exposed brick walls, matte black fixtures, pale oak floors, and Lena's name painted in gold across the glass. Reyes and Lang Design. Build. I watched the opening party through photos posted online by people who had no idea they were documenting evidence. Lena wore emerald silk. Tony wore a navy suit too tight across the shoulders. They stood beneath pendant lights, surrounded by architects, brokers, vendors, minor investors, and social climbers who smelled opportunity like sharks smell blood. Lena looked radiant. I will not lie about that. Cruelty does not erase beauty. She had arranged the space brilliantly. Warm without softness, expensive without seeming desperate. A long stone table down the center, mood boards along one wall, renderings of Meridian Yard displayed on easels, a champagne tower near the entrance, because Lena had always loved things that looked celebratory before anything had been earned. In one photo, Tony stood behind her with both hands on her shoulders. Possession again. In another, Lena tilted her face toward him, laughing. That photo stayed on my screen longer than the others, not because I missed her, because some part of me still searched for the woman I had married inside the woman who had left. I found traces, the angle of her smile, the way she held a glass by the stem, the small crease between her brows when she focused on someone speaking. Then I saw the caption built from nothing but nerve, vision, and courage. Nothing. That word did something in me. Nothing. The office lease she celebrated was mine. The landlord concessions were mine. The contractors who gave them favorable bids were connected to my network. The brokers who referred clients were taking calls from people who answered to me. The Meridian rendering stood on land I had already purchased out from under them. Nothing. I closed the photo. Then I approved 2 more project payments to Tony's company. Let him believe, let her glow. Let the walls rise high enough that their shadows could not be mistaken for mine during those 6 weeks. I saw Lena only twice. The first time was at a mediation intake meeting. Neither of us wanted, but both attorneys recommended. She arrived 10 minutes late, not apologetically late, dramatically late. Tony drove her but did not come inside. I saw his truck through the conference room window, parked badly across 2 spaces. Lena entered wearing white. I remembered that. White blazer, white silk blouse, white trousers. A woman dressing as innocence. Victor, she said. Lena. Her attorney, Mara Ellison, sat beside her with a leather portfolio and the expression of someone already disappointed by the financial disclosures. My attorney, Gregory Vale, sat beside me. Gregory had represented me for 22 years and had the emotional range of poured concrete. He was excellent. The mediator began with the usual language: respect, civility, efficient resolution, shared history. Lena dabbed at one eye with a tissue before anyone said anything emotional. I watched Mara notice that. Good attorney, Mara. She knew performance when she saw it. When finances came up, Lena leaned forward. I don't want to punish Victor, she said. I want that clear. Gregory wrote something on his legal pad. Probably she wants to punish Victor. I just want transparency, Lena continued. For years, I didn't really know where things stood. Victor handled everything. I trusted him. That word again, trusted. I looked at her. She avoided my eyes. Mara said, Mrs. Lang has reason to believe there may be business interests not reflected in the initial disclosure. Gregory did not look up. What reason? Lifestyle inconsistencies. That almost made me laugh. Lena's entire complaint had been that my lifestyle was not impressive enough. Now my modesty was suspicious, Gregory said. Please specify. Mara glanced at Lena. Lena lifted her chin. There were always calls, she said. Late calls, documents, trips he said were property inspections. He made decisions I wasn't part of. Regarding marital assets? Gregory asked. I don't know. Regarding properties titled jointly? I don't know. Regarding income deposited into marital accounts? Lena's cheeks flushed. I said I don't know. Gregory nodded. Then we'll respond when there is an actual request. Mara stepped in. We are requesting a forensic accounting. Of what? Gregory asked Mr. Lang's business interests. Which business interests? All of them. Gregory finally looked up. All of them is not a legal category. Lena's composure cracked. Don't do this, she said to me. I turned toward her. Do what? Hide behind technicalities? I studied her face. For 15 years, she had complained that I was small. Now she wanted the court to search for proof that I had been large. You left because I was ordinary, I said quietly. Now you want discovery because maybe I wasn't? Her mouth opened closed. The mediator cleared her throat. Perhaps we should take a short break. Lena stood immediately and walked out. Through the glass wall, I watched her in the hallway on her phone. Tony, no doubt. Her shoulders moved with agitation. Her free hand sliced the air. At one point she looked back toward the conference room and saw me watching. She turned away. Gregory leaned toward me. She's digging. Yes? How much do you want her to find? Enough to suffer from curiosity. He made a note. You say things like that, and people wonder why attorneys drink. Claire said something similar. Claire is smarter than I am. Listen to her. I did, usually, but not about this. The second time I saw Lena was accidental. Or rather, she believed it was accidental. A restaurant downtown called Vale and Ash. One of Lena's favorites. Small plates, impossible reservations, dramatic lighting. She had once accused me of ruining the atmosphere by calculating table turnover rates under my breath. I went there alone on a Thursday night because I knew she would be there with Tony and 2 potential investors. Not stalking, positioning. There is a difference. The hostess knew me as Mr. Lang, but not which Mr. Lang. In hospitality, names become currency when backed by quiet notes in reservation systems. She seated me in a corner booth with a view of the room. 20 minutes later, Lena entered with Tony. She saw me immediately. Her step faltered. Tony followed her gaze. For half a second, his smile vanished. Then, he performed confidence. He placed his hand on Lena's back and guided her forward. They were seated with a couple. I recognized Martin and Elise Greer, private money. Small enough to be flattered by access, rich enough to be useful, foolish enough to confuse renderings with returns. Martin Greer owed one of my lenders $9.04 million. He did not know I controlled the lender. Dinner began. I did not stare. I read emails, tasted my food, occasionally glanced up like a man noticing weather. Tony talked with his whole body, hands moving, shoulders leaning, teeth flashing. Lena spoke less, but when she did, the table listened. That was her gift. Tony sold excitement. Lena sold inevitability. Together, I could see why people believed them. That irritated me, not because they lacked competence, because they had chosen betrayal when partnership would have been enough. At one point, Lena excused herself and walked toward the restrooms. On the way back, she stopped beside my table. "Are you following me now?" she asked. I looked up. "Number. Then why are you here?" "Dinner. This is my restaurant." That time I did laugh softly. "Your restaurant? You know what I mean." "I know what you mean more often than you do." Her eyes flashed. She looked beautiful when angry. I had forgotten that. "Tony says you've been strange with his projects." "Tony says many things." "Are you interfering?" I set down my fork. "With what?" "With us." "There is no us, Lena." She looked wounded. "Not by the divorce. By the dismissal of her brand new identity. You don't get to make me feel small anymore," she said. There it was again, small. "Lena," I said, keeping my voice low. "I spent years making rooms large enough for you to walk into." She stared at me. For a second, something uncertain moved across her face. "What does that mean?" "It means enjoy your dinner." She stayed there waiting for more. I gave her nothing. Finally, she turned and went back to Tony. But she was distracted after that. Good. Curiosity is a crack, and cracks travel. By the end of the 6th week, Tony and Lena were overextended in exactly the shape I wanted. The office lease was signed with personal guarantees. Equipment financing was approved. 3 residential renovation contracts had been accepted at margins too thin to survive delays. 2 restaurant projects were tied to milestone payments from entities I controlled. Meridian Yard's groundbreaking date was announced publicly. Local business press picked it up. Contractor, designer duo set to transform forgotten industrial site. Duo. I read the article twice. Tony gave quotes about grit. Lena gave quotes about community, beauty, and reimagining neglected spaces. Neglected spaces. That phrase followed me all afternoon. Was that what she thought I was? A neglected space? Something dull and useful, until a more inspired man arrived with demolition plans? That evening, Claire came to my house with 3 bankers' boxes and a bottle of scotch. She placed the boxes on my dining room table. "Evidence," she said. I looked at the bottle. "And that?" "Also evidence, if tonight goes badly." Claire Mercer was 52, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, and built like someone who had never wasted movement. She wore dark suits, low heels, and no jewelry, except a wedding ring from a marriage that had ended so long ago, most people assumed she kept it as a warning. She opened the first box. A fair timeline, hotel records, restaurant receipts, social posts, witness statements if needed. Second box, busyness entanglement. Tony using company funds for personal expenses connected to Lena. Lena using marital surname in new business formation while divorce pending, potential asset diversion. Third box, partnership agreement, amendments, infidelity trigger, reversion notices drafted but not served. I touched the third box. "When?" "Not yet," she said. "I know. Do you?" I looked at her. Claire did not flinch. "You are enjoying the architecture," she said. "That worries me. You think I'll overbuild?" "I think you already have enough to end them cleanly." "Cleanly isn't the point." "Then what is?" I walked to the sideboard and took down 2 glasses. Claire watched me pour. "The point is comprehension." She accepted the glass. "They understand they hurt you." "Number. They understand they escaped me." "And you want them to understand that what they escaped was protection." I turned toward her. "Yes." Claire took a sip. "That's not revenge, Victor." "What is it?" "Grief wearing a hard hat." I hated her a little for that, because she was not wrong. We stood in the dining room surrounded by paper, while the house remained too quiet around us. Finally, she said, "May I ask something personal?" "Number good?" I'll ask anyway. Did you ever consider telling her? About the empire? Yes. I looked at the boxes. Many times. Why didn't you? Because people change around money. They also change around secrets. That landed. I walked to the window. Outside, the garden lights glowed along the path. Lena had chosen them from a catalog, then complained they were too dim once installed. I wanted to know she loved the man without the tower, I said. Claire's reflection watched me in the glass. And did she? For a while. Then why punish her for failing a test she didn't know she was taking? I turned back, because Tony knew exactly what he was doing. That's Tony. She chose him. That's Lena. She mocked my life. She didn't know your life. She knew my character. Claire sighed. There are sighs of fatigue and sighs of moral disagreement. Hers was both. You are going to win, she said. No question. You will take the land, trigger the agreement, bury Tony in contractual default, and leave Lena with a front row seat to her own miscalculation. But understand something. I waited. Winning won't make her grateful for what you hid. I don't need gratitude. No, Claire said. You need a witness. That was the second thing she said that night that stayed with me. A witness. Maybe she was right. Maybe I did not simply want Lena ruined. Maybe I wanted her to see the empire she had mistaken for dust. Maybe I wanted Tony to stand in the open and understand that the boring property manager he had pitied owned the ground beneath his boots. Maybe I wanted the world, for one precise moment, to stop confusing noise with power. I raised my glass to witnesses then. Claire did not drink. Victor. What? Be careful that the witness doesn't become the reason. Too late, I thought, but I did not say it. 3 days later, Tony made his first real mistake. He sent me an invitation, not personally, of course. Men like Tony prefer insults with plausible deniability. The email came from Reyes and Lang's new office account. You are cordially invited to the groundbreaking ceremony for Meridian Yard. A visionary redevelopment by Reyes and Lang Design. Build. Below that, the date, the time, the address, and a glossy rendering of the project. At the bottom, in smaller text, special recognition to our community partners and early supporters. I stared at the phrase, early supporters. That was me. I had supported Tony from contractor to target. I had supported Lena from aspiring designer to public fool. I had supported their dream so thoroughly they mistook the scaffolding for sky. Attached was a VIP parking pass. That made me laugh. Tony had invited me to stand in a crowd and watch him break ground on land I owned, beside the wife he took from me, under a banner carrying my name. That was not arrogance, that was art. I forwarded the invitation to Claire with one line. Prepare arrival. She called within 30 seconds. Define arrival. You know what I mean. I am afraid I do. Helicopter, Victor. Land adjacent north lot. That is theatrics. Yes, you hate theatrics. I hate amateur theatrics, she groaned softly. You want public halt? At peak visibility? Press present? Encourage more? Demolition? Permitted safety removal of unauthorized preliminary work. That foundation pour is scheduled 2 days before groundbreaking. I know. You are going to let them pour it? Yes, that increases loss. That increases clarity. Claire was quiet. Then she said, I need you to hear the sentence I am about to say. You are paying for concrete so you can destroy it in front of your wife. I am not paying for it. Through controlled entities, you are indirectly responsible for the conditions that allow it. Claire. No. Let me finish. Legally, we can manage. Financially, it's irrelevant. Strategically, it's devastating. But personally, this is a cathedral built out of spite. I looked at the invitation again. Lena's name, Tony's name, Meridian Yard. No, I said, it's a mirror. After the call, I walked into the hallway and looked at the one remaining design sketch Lena had left behind. It was from years earlier, a concept for a small hotel lobby. Warm wood, stone fireplace, deep chairs, soft light. She had been proud of it. I had loved it. The project never got built, not because she failed, because the client died and the property sold. Lena had cried that night. I remembered sitting with her on the floor, the sketch between us. I am tired of almost, she whispered. I told her. Then we'll keep going. I had meant it. Maybe she had too. For a while, I took the sketch off the wall. Behind it, the paint was clean and bright. Another pale rectangle. I carried it to the office, opened a storage drawer, and placed it inside. Not thrown away, not displayed. Stored. That is what I do with things that still matter, but no longer belong in view. The next morning, Lena called again. This time I answered immediately. "Victor," she said, "did you get the invitation?" "Yes." A pause. "I didn't know they sent it to you." "Of course you did. Number." Tony's assistant handles the list. Lena, silence, then softer. "Are you coming?" "Yes," she exhaled. "I don't think that's a good idea." I was invited. "It might be painful." "For whom?" She did not answer. I could hear traffic behind her. She was outside somewhere. "Victor, I don't want a scene." "Then don't make one. You know what I mean." "I usually do." She lowered her voice. "Tony is under a lot of pressure." That interested me. What kind? Busyness pressure. Financing investors' permits. Normal things. Normal things. The first hairline fractures had appeared. Then, "And you?" I asked. "What about me? Are you under pressure?" "I am fine." "Lie. You always say that when you aren't." Her breath caught. For a moment the old marriage entered the line. Not love, not forgiveness. Familiarity, the dangerous intimacy of knowing someone's weather. Then she hardened. "I am happier than I've been in years." "Then why are you calling me?" Another silence. "Because I don't want you to embarrass yourself." There she was, my wife, still able to cut cleanly when afraid. I leaned back in my chair. "Lena, let me tell you something my father taught me. I don't need one of your little lessons." He said people reveal themselves by what they think will humiliate you. I am hanging up. "You think being ordinary humiliates me because you were humiliated by it." She said nothing. "I was never ashamed of the house, or the office, or the work you were." Her voice came cold. "You have no idea what it felt like being married to a man with no hunger." I looked at the empire map glowing faintly on my second monitor. "No hunger," I repeated. "No ambition, no fire, no vision beyond collecting rent and fixing drains." Every word was a brick added to the structure. "Thank you," I said. "For what? Clarity?" She hung up again. That became our pattern. She called to control damage. I answered to collect truth. Meanwhile, Tony's world expanded and tightened. He signed the Crestwell lease. He hired 6 new employees. He ordered signage. He accepted accelerated material deliveries for Meridian. He personally guaranteed a bridge loan at brutal terms, because the larger financing had been delayed. He blamed banks. He blamed city review. He blamed seller confusion. He never blamed the invisible hand moving every wall 2 inches closer. Lena began appearing in more photos. At job sites in white hard hats. At the office, reviewing fabric samples. At dinners beside Tony. Always smiling. Always polished. Always slightly thinner than before. I noticed that. I did not enjoy it. Not exactly. Revenge is easiest when the target remains symbolic. A villain, a thief, a betrayer. It becomes harder when you remember how she takes coffee, how she rubs her left temple when anxious, how she once stayed awake all night beside you after your father died, saying nothing because nothing would help. But difficulty does not absolve. Memory is not mercy. At the end of the second month, the first major delay hit. East Bank Utilities issued a review hold on Tony's secondary restaurant project. Not false. Never false. That was important. There was an old easement conflict in the records. Real, but usually ignored. Claire's people simply made sure it was not ignored. The restaurant owner panicked. Tony soothed him. Then a custom window shipment for another project was rerouted because of a warehouse inventory discrepancy. Also real. Also encouraged. Then a city inspector flagged an unpermitted structural modification in a loft conversion Tony had rushed. That one was entirely Tony's fault. I had simply made sure the inspector arrived before drywall covered the evidence. Pressure, not impact. Tony began borrowing from one project to cover another. Classic. I watched the numbers shift, payroll covered late, vendor payments stretched, subcontractors grumbling. Lena's design invoices delayed because Tony needed cash elsewhere. Still, publicly, they shun. That was the cruel balance. Private panic, public assent. The groundbreaking approached like weather. 3 days before the ceremony, Tony poured the first section of foundation at Meridian, unauthorized under the final ownership structure. Technically premature. Emotionally perfect. Drone footage appeared online within hours. Concrete trucks. Workers in reflective vests. Tony standing with arms crossed like a general. Lena walking across the site in boots that had never known mud before that morning. Caption: "The foundation is set. No turning back now. I saved it. No turning back." Exactly. That night, Claire sent me the final sequence plan. Confirm land ownership under Northgate Vale complete. Serve halt notice on site morning of ceremony. Hold service until public remarks begin. Arrive by helicopter only after Tony publicly identifies Reyes and Lang as controlling developer. Present recorded ownership chain summary. Serve reversion notice to Lena under partnership agreement. Serve default notices tied to lease guarantees. Begin permitted removal of unauthorized foundation and temporary structures. Security controls perimeter. Media receives document packet after visual event. Efficient. Elegant. Brutal. I read it 3 times. Then I called Claire. "You forgot one thing," I said. "What?" "I speak first." "No." "Yes." "Absolutely not." Claire. "A legal packet speaks better than a wounded husband." I won't sound wounded. That's what wounded men always think. I stood at the window of my office. The city lights burned in the distance. I need Tony to understand before the documents hit him. Why? Because paperwork feels abstract until a man knows who is holding the pen. Claire was quiet. Then she said, "What will you say?" "Not on paper. In stone. I'll tell him congratulations." Claire sighed. "Of course you will." After we hung up, I did something I had not done since Lena left. I went into her closet. Her side was mostly empty now, but not completely. A few hangers remained. A scarf had slipped behind a shoe rack. An old sweater lay folded on the top shelf. One she used to wear on winter mornings. I touched it once. Then I closed the closet door. There are moments before revenge when a man meets himself. Not the version with plans. Not the version with money. Not the version lawyers obey and enemies underestimate. The private self. The one who knows exactly how much of this is justice and how much is the childish desire to say, "Look what you threw away." I stood in the bedroom and let that truth have the room. Yes, I wanted her to look. I wanted Lena Lang to stand beneath the banner of her new life and realize every beam above her had my fingerprints on it. I wanted Tony Reyes to feel the ground vanish. I wanted every person who had smiled at their story to understand they had been applauding inside a building I owned. Was that noble? No. But betrayal rarely leaves noble things behind. It leaves tools. I chose mine carefully. On the morning of the groundbreaking, I woke before sunrise. I shaved. I dressed in a dark suit Lena had never seen because I never wore those suits home. Then I took from my safe a watch my father had left me. Plain steel. Scratched face. No luxury brand anyone at the ceremony would recognize. He wore it while collecting rent from men who laughed at him, never knowing he owned their roofs. I fastened it around my wrist. At 8:00, Claire arrived with Gregory, 2 security leads, and a media consultant who looked terrified but excited. Claire studied me. "You look calm." "I am." "That's worse." Gregory handed me a slim folder. "Your speaking notes. I don't need them. Humor me. Also, don't improvise crimes." I took the folder. The helicopter waited at a private airfield 20 minutes away. On the ride there, no one spoke much. The city slid past the tinted windows, office towers, apartment blocks, cranes, traffic, neighborhoods waking into routine, all that ordinary life. The kind Lena thought suffocated her. I wondered, briefly, what she was doing at that exact moment. Hair, makeup, white hard hat, smile rehearsal. Tony would be practicing his speech, words like vision, grit, community, future. He would not say debt. He would not say deception. He would not say victor. Not yet. At the airfield, the helicopter blades began turning as we approached. Claire leaned close before we boarded. Last chance to convert to quiet service. I looked at her. Do you think I should? Yes. Why? Because quiet justice is still justice. I looked toward the helicopter. And public betrayal? She understood. Public betrayal demands public correction. She did not agree, but she understood. We lifted into the morning sky at 9:17. Below us, the city became geometry. Roads, parcels, roofs, lots. Boundaries invisible from the ground but perfectly clear from above. That was always the truth of power. Perspective. Tony and Lena had been walking through my maze at street level. Now I was coming from above. Meridian Yard appeared ahead, dressed for celebration. White tents, rows of chairs, a small stage, branded banners, catering vans, cameras, a crowd of perhaps 200. At the center, near the freshly poured concrete foundation, stood Tony and Lena. Even from the air, I saw her look up. One hand rose to shield her eyes. Tony looked up too. For a moment, I imagined his thoughts. Investor? Official? News crew? Opportunity? Then descended toward the adjacent north lot. Dust lifted. People turned. Phones rose. The theater had begun. And this time, I had written the ending. Chapter 3. The ground beneath their feet. The helicopter touched down at 9:20, 4 a.m. Dust spiraled across the north lot in violent circles, scattering loose papers and sending a catering assistant running after a linen napkin that whipped through the air like surrender. I stepped out first. The noise of the rotors swallowed the crowd for a moment, but confusion has its own silence. Even through the roar, I could feel it spreading across Meridian Yard. People stared, not because they recognized me, because they didn't. To them, I was simply a man in a dark suit arriving by helicopter at a groundbreaking ceremony that already had owners. That was the beginning of discomfort. Ownership hates surprise. Claire stepped out behind me, followed by Gregory and two security men in charcoal jackets. One carried document tubes. The other held a hard shell case containing the service packets. Tony stood frozen near the stage, Lena beside him. Even from a distance, I saw the exact second recognition hit her. Not recognition of wealth, recognition of certainty. I walked toward them across the gravel lot while the helicopter blades slowed behind me. People parted instinctively. That fascinated me about human beings. Confidence rearranges space faster than authority does. Tony recovered first. He forced a smile and strode forward with his hand extended, performing calm for the audience already watching. "Victor!" he shouted over the fading rotor noise. "Didn't expect you to make an entrance." I looked at his hand, then at him slowly. I shook it. His palm was damp. "Interesting. You invited me?" I said. Tony laughed too loudly. Right, of course." His eyes flicked toward the helicopter. Then to Claire, then to Gregory. Calculation. For the first time since Lena left me, Tony Reyes looked uncertain about the shape of the room. Good. Lena approached more carefully. She wore a cream-colored coat over dark slacks, a white hard hat tucked under one arm. Her makeup was immaculate. Her smile was not. "Victor," she said quietly. I looked at her for a long moment. In another life, we could have been arriving together. That thought came unwanted and disappeared just as quickly. "You look nervous," I said. Her expression tightened. "I am not. You bite the inside of your cheek when you lie." Tony stepped in immediately. "Well," he said brightly, "this is definitely unexpected, but we're glad you came." He placed a hand at the small of Lena's back again. Possession. Always possession. It no longer angered me. Now it simply looked temporary. Around us, guests whispered. Some recognized me vaguely from property meetings or tenant conferences. Others assumed I was an investor. A few reporters lifted cameras, sensing movement beneath the polished surface of the event. The stage behind Tony carried a massive rendering of Meridian Yard. Brick facades, outdoor courtyards, restaurants, boutique retail, and across the bottom, in elegant lettering, Thea Reyes and Lang Development, Faye my surname again. Still amusing, Tony cleared his throat. We're about to start the ceremony, he said carefully. You are welcome to stay, obviously, but maybe we should talk privately afterward. No, I said, his smile faltered. No? Number, I think this works better publicly. A tiny flicker crossed Lena's face. Fear. There it was, the first true crack. Tony straightened slightly. Victor, whatever this is today isn't really the time. I disagree. Claire stepped forward, then smooth as poured concrete. Mr. Reyes, she said pleasantly, before the ceremony proceeds, Northgate Urban Holdings requires acknowledgement of a pending ownership dispute regarding this parcel. Tony blinked. What? She handed him a sealed folder. He stared at it without taking it. What is this? Documentation. I don't understand. I know, Claire said. Finally, he grabbed the folder. Lena looked between us. Victor, she whispered. What did you do? I met her eyes. Nothing sudden. Tony opened the packet aggressively, flipping pages faster than comprehension allowed. At first, confusion, then irritation, then disbelief. That's impossible, he snapped. We have option control. Had, Gregory corrected. Tony looked up sharply. The seller accepted transfer terms 48 days ago. That can't happen without notification. It can, Gregory said calmly, if your financing contingencies remain unresolved. Tony's face flushed dark red. Number, no. We had an agreement. You had an option, Gregory replied. Those are different things. Lena stepped closer to Tony. What's he talking about? Tony ignored her, flipping pages wildly now. This is bullshit. This is corporate interference. You can't just steal a project. Steal? I repeated softly. He looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time, he saw something he had never bothered searching for before. Not sadness, not humiliation, control. You, he said quietly. Yes, you are behind this? I own the land. The words landed harder than shouting ever could. Behind us, the crowd had gone nearly silent. Even the reporters stopped pretending not to listen. Lena stared at me, then laughed once in disbelief. What? I own the land, I repeated. No, Tony snapped. No, you are a property manager. I almost admired how desperately he needed that to remain true. Among other things, I said. Claire handed another folder to Lena. This concerns your partnership interests, Mrs. Lang. Lena looked down numbly. What partnership interests? The ones connected to your jointly held ventures, projects, and marital asset structures? Her brows furrowed. I don't understand. You signed an infidelity reversion clause 11 years ago, Gregory said. Trigger conditions have been satisfied. The color drained from her face. Number. You transferred beneficial ownership rights upon breach. No, she repeated louder. That's not possible. You signed it, Gregory said. I would remember that. You remembered the title page, I said quietly, not the foundation underneath it. Her eyes snapped toward me. You hid this. Number, I trusted you to read it. That's insane. No, I said. It's contractual. Tony slammed the folder shut. This is intimidation. No, Claire replied smoothly. This is ownership. Tony turned toward the crowd then, trying to recover control. Everybody relax, he shouted. This is legal posturing. We're still moving forward. I watched him carefully. The contractor in him still believed momentum could overpower reality. Workers think that way sometimes. If enough concrete is poured, enough steel raised, enough labor invested, surely the project becomes real through sheer force of effort. But construction obeys paper before physics. And paper was mine. Tony jabbed a finger toward me. You think money lets you do whatever you want? No, I said. Then what the hell is this? This, I said softly, is consequence. His jaw flexed. Lena stepped toward me suddenly. You orchestrated this. Yes? All of it? Yes? Her breathing changed. I knew that sound. Panic arriving carefully? The office? She asked faintly. Yes? The clients? Many of them? The referrals? Yes? She shook her head slowly, as though trying to wake herself from underwater. No. You wanted opportunity, I said. I gave it to you. You controlled my career. I opened doors. You manipulated my entire life. No, I said evenly. I supported it quietly enough that you mistook support for fate. That hurt her more than the land. I saw it immediately, because some part of Lena already knew it was true. Tony stepped between us. Don't talk to her like that. I looked at him. You should be careful telling people what belongs to them today. That struck cleanly. Tony's rage finally surfaced without polish. You smug son of a bitch. There he is, Claire murmured under her breath. Tony took a step toward me. Security shifted instantly, not aggressively, professionally. That only humiliated him further. You think this makes you powerful? Tony snapped. Hiding behind companies and lawyers? No, I said. Building things that last makes me powerful. You are trying to destroy us because your wife left you. No, I replied calmly. Your mistake was believing she left someone weak. Behind Tony, one of the reporters raised a camera higher. Good. Let them record this. Not for vanity. For accuracy, Tony spread his arms toward the site. We built this. I looked around Meridian Yard, the tents, the staging, the concrete foundation curing beneath morning light. The workers standing uncertainly near excavators, the investors whispering anxiously into phones. Then I looked back at Tony. No, I said quietly. You decorated my land. That one landed hard. Lena covered her mouth. Tony's face twitched with the first unmistakable sign of fear. Not anger fear, because suddenly he understood something terrible. If I truly owned the ground beneath Meridian, then every success he had celebrated recently might also belong to me. I watched realization begin climbing behind his eyes, like fire moving through walls. The restaurant projects, he said slowly. Yes. The office lease. Yes. The hotel contracts. Yes. Tony stared at me. You fed us. Carefully. Why? I thought about that. Really thought about it. Why? Because revenge without revelation felt incomplete. Because betrayal deserved understanding. Because I wanted him to climb high enough to see exactly how far he could fall. Because, I said at last, I wanted you confident. The crowd shifted uneasily. People were beginning to leave quietly now. Smart people. Investors hate uncertainty more than failure. Lena suddenly grabbed my arm, actually grabbed it. Victor, she whispered urgently. Please. I looked down at her hand, then at her face. The fear was real now. No performance left. What? Not like this? Publicly? Yes, you left publicly. That's different. Why? Tears finally filled her eyes. Because I didn't know. There it was. The sentence she truly meant. Not, I didn't mean to hurt you. Not, I still care about you. Not, I made a mistake. I didn't know you mattered this much. I gently removed her hand from my arm. That, I said softly, is the entire problem. Then the bulldozers arrived. 2 massive yellow machines rolled through the far gate with backup alarms echoing across the site. The timing was perfect. Claire, of course. Workers stared. Tony spun around. What the hell is this? A city inspector stepped forward beside the machines holding a clipboard. Unauthorized foundational work on privately controlled land, he announced. Removal order authorized pending legal review. Tony actually laughed then. A wild, broken sound. Number no, you can't be serious. The bulldozers continued forward, slow, heavy. I watched Lena's face as she understood. Not the lawsuits, not the ownership structures, the symbolism. The foundation itself was about to be destroyed. Everything she thought she built with Tony reduced publicly to rubble before walls ever rose. She looked at me with something close to horror. You planned this. Yes. For how long? Since the night you left, Tony stormed toward the inspector. You stop those machines right now. The inspector calmly handed him another notice. Tony didn't even look at it. One bulldozer lowered its blade toward the fresh concrete edge. The sound it made was strangely soft at first. Concrete cracking under pressure like ice breaking on a lake, then louder. Chunks collapsing inward. Steel reinforcement bending sharply. Gasps spread through the crowd. Phones rose everywhere now. Lena stared as the first section of foundation caved inward beneath the machine's blade. I watched her shoulders sag, not dramatically, not theatrically, like a structure finally admitting its load. Bearing wall is gone. Tony turned back toward me. You ruined us. I looked him in the eye. No, I said. I revealed you too early. That was the moment he truly broke. Because he understood. Without my projects, without my pipeline, without my protection, he had built nothing sustainable at all. Just leverage stacked on leverage. And now the hand beneath the stack had pulled away. The second bulldozer rolled forward. More concrete shattered. The banner behind the stage fluttered violently in the wind. Reyes and Lang Development. A loose support snapped. The banner tilted sideways. For one absurd moment, Lena reached toward it instinctively, as though she could still save the image. Then the entire structure collapsed backward into the dirt. No one spoke. I looked at Lena one last time, mascara beginning to run, hard hat hanging forgotten at her side. The woman who once told me our life suffocated her now standing in the ruins of the future she chose instead. Victor, she whispered. I waited. But whatever she wanted to say never came. Because finally, she understood something worse than losing money. She understood she had never seen the man she betrayed. And by the time she did, it was too late. Chapter 4. Collapse has an address. The first lawsuit hit Tony before sunset. Not the biggest one. Not even the most dangerous. Just the first crack loud enough for everyone nearby to hear the structure shifting. I was in the back office of the Bellwether Hotel when Claire walked in holding a tablet and a folder thick enough to stop a bullet. Outside the windows, downtown glowed under evening rain. Traffic lights smeared red and gold across wet streets below. Somewhere in the city, reporters were already editing footage from Meridian Yard. The helicopter, the bulldozers, Tony screaming, Lena staring at the collapsing foundation as though watching her own reflection crack apart. By morning, clips would be everywhere. Claire dropped the folder onto the table. 3 investors froze funding within an hour, she said. 1 restaurant client terminated outright. The East Bank Group issued default notices. And she slid the tablet toward me. A local business headline filled the screen. Fay Development Dispute explodes at Meridian Yard Ceremony. Fay below it. A photograph. Tony caught mid-shout, me standing calm. Lena in the background, pale and stunned beneath a tilted hard hat. I stared at the image for several seconds. Interesting, I murmured. Claire removed her coat. What? They framed her in the center. Claire looked at the photo again. She's the emotional anchor. No, I said quietly. She's the consequence. Claire sat across from me. You know she called your office 31 times? I looked up. Today? Since the ceremony ended? And I instructed staff not to transfer. Good. Not because I enjoyed starving her for contact. Because desperation clarifies people. Lena had spent months speaking to me from a position of imagined superiority. I wanted to hear her after certainty collapsed. Claire opened the folder. Here is the current damage. She spoke the next 20 minutes in the cold language of professional ruin. Meridian investors initiating fraud review. Bridge lenders demanding additional collateral. Subcontractors placing preliminary liens. Insurance carriers reconsidering exposure. Vendors switching to cash-only terms. Reyes and Lang's office lease flagged for accelerated review after breach concerns. Tony's equipment financing under scrutiny, pending audits. Payment freezes. Potential criminal exposure if commingled funds surfaced. The list went on. And underneath all of it sat one terrible truth. Tony Reyes had expanded too fast using borrowed credibility mine. You built a very elegant avalanche, Claire said finally. I looked out the rain-streaked window. No, I said. I built gravity. He climbed anyway. Claire studied me carefully. You should know something. What? Lena left the site separately. That interested me. Not with Tony? Number witnesses say they argued beside the parking area for nearly 20 minutes. I leaned back slowly. About what? Claire handed me another sheet. Private investigator audio isn't clean, but we caught fragments. I scanned the transcript. You knew him. You said he was nothing. How was I supposed to know? You used me. We were building this together. No, you were building it with his money? I read the last line twice. Tony had said that, not me. Interesting. The first instinct in collapse is always redistribution of blame. Lena would blame deception. Tony would blame dependency. Both were correct. Neither understood that dependence had always been the point. You cannot betray foundations without discovering what they were holding up. Claire poured herself a drink from the sideboard. You are quiet. I am thinking. That usually precedes something expensive. I ignored that. What's Tony doing now, drinking? How much? Enough that 2 employees quit before 5 p.m. I nodded. Tony struck me as the kind of man who believed alcohol made panic look masculine. And Lena? Claire hesitated. She went back to the office? Alone? Yes. That surprised me. I stood and walked toward the windows. Far below, headlights moved through rain-like veins, carrying light through a living thing. She won't stay there long, Claire said. Why? Because reality has entered the building. At 9:14 a.m. p.m., my phone rang. Lena. This time, I answered immediately. Silence greeted me first, then breathing. Finally, how long? No hello, no anger, just those 2 words. How long? I remained quiet. How long have you been this? She whispered. This, all of it. I looked at my reflection in the glass. A man in a dark suit standing high above a city he quietly owned pieces of. A long time. You let me think. Yes, her voice cracked sharply. You let me believe you were small. No, I said calmly. You decided that on your own. She inhaled shakily. Why would you hide this from me? There it was again. The same question, different form. Why didn't you tell me I was standing in a palace while I complained about the wallpaper? Because I needed to know whether you loved security, I said quietly, or status. And if I failed, you did. Silence. Then softer. Victor. I didn't know. You keep saying that. Because it's true. No, I replied. The truth is worse. I heard her breathing hitch. You saw a decent man who treated you well, protected your life, supported your career, stayed loyal to you for 15 years, and you called him dead weight because he didn't perform wealth loudly enough. Stop? You wanted spectacle? Please stop. So you followed the first man who mistook confidence for competence? I said stop. Her voice shattered at the end. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered something so quietly I almost missed it. Was any of it real? That question hurt more than the affair. Not because she asked whether I loved her, because she asked whether the life itself had been fake. The house was real, I said softly. The dinners were real. The trips were real. The mornings were real. The support was real. The loyalty was real. Then why do I feel like I never knew you? Because you only respected visible things, she began crying then. Not elegantly, not performatively. The ugly kind people make when identity tears. I ruined everything, she whispered. I closed my eyes briefly. There it was. Not anger, recognition. The beginning of true collapse is not financial. It is narrative. The moment a person realizes the story they told themselves about their life was built on vanity. Tony says you planned this from the beginning, she said weakly. Number? But you gave him the contracts. Yes? Why? Because I wanted to see what he'd do with trust. And I thought about Meridian, the office, the loans, the affair. He converted opportunity into appetite. She cried harder after that. Not because of Tony, because she knew the sentence applied to her too. Around midnight, Tony finally called. I answered from my study at home. He sounded drunk immediately. You proud of yourself? He slurred. Number? Bullshit. Rain hammered softly against the windows behind me. You think this makes you king? He demanded. Number? You destroyed my business? No, I said evenly. I removed support your business depended on. You fed me poisoned work. I fed you opportunity. You manipulated everything. I revealed character. Tony laughed bitterly. You smug, rich bastard. There it was at last, rich. The word he had avoided saying publicly. You know what your problem is? He continued. You think money makes you smarter than everybody. No, I replied. I think patience does. You hid behind shell companies like a coward. You slept with another man's wife while taking his contracts. Silence, then breathing. Heavy, dangerous. I loved her, he muttered. That interested me enough to sit forward. No, I said quietly. You loved winning her. His temper exploded instantly. You don't know a damn thing about me. I know you borrowed against 3 future receivables yesterday morning. Silence. I know your payroll account has 6 days left without emergency liquidity. More silence. I know you transferred equipment debt into secondary entities, trying to shield exposure. A chair scraped violently on his end. And I know, I continued calmly, that you are beginning to understand how much of your life depended on a man you thought was beneath you. His breathing turned ragged. How? He whispered. Tony, what? You should never build your empire on land you haven't verified? Then I hung up. The next morning, the media frenzy worsened. By noon, national business blogs had picked up the story, not because of the affair, because people love hidden wealth narratives. Property manager secretedly owns massive real estate empire. Betrayed husband halts development during public ceremony. Anonymous billionaire behind urban holdings revealed. Most of it exaggerated. Some of it inaccurate. None of it helpful. I hated publicity. Real power prefers dim rooms. But secrecy, once broken, behaves like floodwater. Claire entered my office around lunchtime carrying another stack of reports. You are trending, she said dryly. How humiliating. 3 journalists found possible links between Northgate and Dunmere. That was inevitable. One already called you the ghost landlord. I looked up. That's actually not terrible. Claire smirked despite herself. Then her face hardened again. Lena's here. That stopped me. Here? In the lobby? Alone? Yes. I considered that for several seconds. How does she look? Claire's expression shifted slightly, like someone who finally understands how cold real fear feels. I nodded once. Send her up. When Lena entered my office 10 minutes later, I almost didn't recognize her. Not physically, emotionally. The polished certainty was gone. No designer coat, no dramatic makeup, no performance, just exhaustion. She stood in the doorway looking at me as though seeing me clearly for the first time. And maybe she was? This is your office? She asked quietly. Not the property management office, the real one, the private executive floor hidden behind layers of holding companies and silent elevators. Glass walls overlooked half the city. Architectural models lined illuminated shelves. Digital maps glowed across an enormous display wall showing acquisitions in 4 countries. My real world. Yes, I said. She walked slowly farther inside. You came here every day? Sometimes? And then went back to that little office? Yes? Why? Because work matters more than display? She stared at the city below. I called you pathetic in front of people. I remember. Tears filled her eyes again. I thought you were wasting your life. I said nothing. That hurt her more. She turned toward me slowly. Did you ever love me? The question landed differently this time. Not accusatory, terrified. Yes, her face crumpled. Then why does this feel so cruel? I stood. Because some answers should not be delivered sitting down. Because, I said quietly, you are experiencing the difference between being unloved and being wrong. That broke her completely. She covered her mouth and sobbed into her hands. Not graceful, not cinematic. Human. For several moments, I simply watched her. Not coldly, not triumphantly, honestly. I had imagined this scene many times after she left. In those fantasies, I thought revelation would feel satisfying. Instead, it felt heavy, like carrying stone uphill long after the structure is already built. Finally, she whispered, Tony says you are destroying us to punish me. I walked to the windows. No, I said softly. I am destroying the illusion that you built anything without me. She cried harder at that because she knew. God help her, she knew. Every client, every referral, every opportunity, every glowing step upward, supported invisibly by the husband she dismissed as ordinary. I hate you, she whispered weakly. I nodded once. I know. But even as she said it, I heard the truth underneath. Not hatred, humiliation. and humiliation is grief-wearing armor. An hour later, she left through the private elevator. When the doors closed, Claire stepped from the adjoining office. "You still love her a little," she said. I kept staring at the empty elevator doors. "Yes, and?" I thought about the bulldozers, the foundation collapsing, Tony screaming, Lena crying in my office beneath the skyline. She never knew I owned pieces of. "And some structures," I said quietly, "can't survive once the load, bearing truth is exposed." That evening, Tony Reyes disappeared for 12 hours. No one could reach him. Not lenders, not employees, not Lena. At 2:17 a.m., security footage finally placed him alone inside the darkened Reyes and Lang office, drinking from a bottle while staring at the company logo painted on the glass wall. Reyes and Lang, his and hers, built from contracts that belonged to me. At 32 a.m., he smashed the glass. At 3:11 a.m., he called Lena 70. 4 times, at 3:20. 6 a.m., he left a voicemail. Claire had it transcribed before sunrise. One sentence stood out above all the drunken rage. "He made us possible." Yes, I thought while reading it. That was exactly the tragedy. And finally, Tony understood it too. Chapter 5. Foundations. 3 months after Meridian Yard collapsed, Tony Reyes stood alone in bankruptcy court wearing a suit that no longer fit him. I watched through a private legal feed from my office in Singapore. Not because I enjoyed seeing him broken. That part had passed already. There is a common misunderstanding about revenge, that the avenger lives in permanent ecstasy once the enemy falls. Not true. The moment of destruction burns hot and bright. But afterward comes something quieter inventory. You walk through the wreckage and decide whether the cost was worth the architecture. Tony looked older now. Not dramatically, just emptied. The kind of aging that happens when certainty evaporates faster than pride can compensate. His construction company was finished. The office lease defaulted. The equipment repossessed. 3 major lawsuits settled against him after investigators uncovered commingled funds, falsified draw schedules, and concealed debt exposure. Nothing criminal stuck in the end. Tony had been reckless, not sophisticated. Men like him rarely build clean enough lies to qualify as masterminds. Mostly, he had been desperate to keep appearing successful long after the structure underneath him began cracking. That desperation destroyed him more thoroughly than I ever could. Claire entered my Singapore office carrying coffee and a tablet. Outside the glass walls behind her, the Marina Bay skyline shimmered silver, blue against morning fog. Cargo ships moved slowly across the water like patient machinery. "You are watching the hearing again," she said. "Yes. Why?" I considered lying, then didn't. "Because I wanted to know whether he understood." "And?" I looked back at the screen. Tony sat slumped beside his attorney while creditors argued over scraps. "Yes," I said quietly. "He understands." Claire handed me the tablet. "Lena signed the final settlement this morning." That landed differently. Not hard, just deep. I took the tablet. The settlement was brutally simple. She retained limited personal assets, 1 small design account, and enough liquid capital to restart modestly somewhere else if she chose. Everything tied to the partnership structures reverted fully under the infidelity clauses and associated commercial protections. Legally airtight. Emotionally devastating. She fought less than expected, Claire said. Why? She stopped believing she deserved to win? I read that sentence twice, then set the tablet down. Singapore sunlight spread slowly across the office floor. 6 months earlier, Lena would have loved this room. The view, the architecture, the prestige. Now I suspected it would only remind her of everything she failed to see while it mattered. Claire sat across from me. She asked about you. That surprised me. What exactly? Whether you were happy. I almost laughed. Happy. Such a small word for something so difficult to measure. I didn't answer, Claire continued. Good. She also asked if you ever intended to tell her the truth. I walked toward the windows. Far below, the city moved with perfect disciplined rhythm. Ferries cut across the harbor. Financial towers reflected morning light like polished steel. I did intend to tell her, I said quietly. Claire looked up sharply. When? Our 20th anniversary? That genuinely shocked her. You planned that? Yes? How? I smiled faintly despite myself. A trip. Europe first, then Singapore, then Tokyo. I bought a vineyard property in Tuscany 2 years ago under another entity. I was going to transfer it into her name. Claire stared at me for several seconds. You never told me that. No one knew. And you were finally going to show her everything? Yes. Claire leaned back slowly. My God. I nodded once. That was the true tragedy, not the money, not the betrayal timing. If Lena had waited 5 more years, she would have discovered the Empire as my partner instead of my opponent. But people impatient for spectacle rarely survive long enough to inherit quiet rewards. You still think about her, Claire said carefully. Yes. Do you regret any of it? I looked down at the harbor. A question like that deserves honesty. Yes, I said finally. Claire said nothing. I regret that I loved someone who mistook stability for weakness, I continued. And I regret enjoying the destruction more than I expected. That part mattered, because revenge changes the builder too. You cannot demolish entire lives without inhaling some dust yourself. A week later, I saw Lena for the last time. Not by accident. She requested the meeting formally through Gregory. 1 hour, private. No attorneys present. I almost refused. Then curiosity betrayed me. We met at the old house, the modest one she once called suffocating. I arrived early. The garden had been trimmed recently. The roses were blooming again along the walkway. Inside, the rooms felt cleaner now, emptier too. I stood in the kitchen where she first left me while late afternoon sunlight spread gold across the counters. Memory has geography. Certain rooms never fully release what happened inside them. At exactly 4 o'clock, the front door opened. Lena entered slowly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She looked thinner than before, simpler. No expensive coat, no performance, just dark jeans, a sweater, and tired eyes. But something else had changed too. Stillness. The frantic hunger inside her seemed gone. I almost didn't come, she said. I know. How? You pause before difficult things. A faint sad smile touched her mouth. You still notice everything. Yes. She walked slowly through the kitchen. I used to hate this room, she admitted quietly. I remember. I thought it meant my life had failed. I leaned against the counter, and now, her eyes moved across the house carefully, like someone studying ruins of a civilization she once mocked. Now it feels peaceful. That hurt more than if she'd insulted it again, because now she finally understood too late. She looked at me. You really loved me. Not a question this time. A realization? Yes. Why didn't you ever defend yourself? Against what? The things I said. The way I treated you near the end. I thought about that, because the answer mattered. Pride, I said finally. She blinked. Yours? Number yours. She frowned slightly. I knew if I revealed everything just to win an argument, you'd never trust any love attached to it afterward. Tears gathered slowly in her eyes. So instead, you let me think you were ordinary. I was ordinary in the ways that mattered. She shook her head softly. Number, you were hiding an empire. I was hiding money. That's different. For several seconds, she simply stared at me. Then she whispered the sentence I think she had been carrying for months. If I had known. There it is, I said quietly. Pain crossed her face immediately. You hate that sentence. Yes. Why? Because it proves my point. She lowered her eyes. I walked to the sink and rested one hand against the counter, where I had stood the night she left. You should have loved the man before discovering the kingdom, I said softly. Silence filled the kitchen. Outside, sprinklers clicked across the lawn. Finally, Lena spoke. I did love you. I looked at her. Then why did you leave? She laughed weakly through tears. Because I was stupid. No defense, no performance, just truth. That almost made forgiveness dangerous. Almost. I thought excitement meant depth, she continued. I thought ambition had to look loud. Tony made me feel chosen, important, desired. And me? You made me feel safe. There it was, the oldest tragedy in human history. People often worship fireworks while quietly depending on foundations. You know what the worst part is? She whispered. What? I can't even hate you properly. That surprised a small, honest laugh out of me. She smiled faintly through tears. Every time I try, I remember something kind you did. The room went quiet again. Then she looked around slowly. Did you ever think we'd end up like this? Number? I did. That caught my attention. What? Near the end? She said quietly. Not like this exactly, but I knew something terrible was happening to me. I waited. I started measuring people by what they displayed instead of who they were. And once you start doing that, she swallowed hard. Nothing feels enough anymore. That was the most truthful thing she had said in years. We stood there in the fading light, surrounded by the ghost of a marriage neither of us fully understood while we were living it. Finally, she reached into her purse and removed something small. A key, the old house key. I should have returned this sooner, she said. I took it carefully. Her fingers brushed mine for half a second. Memory is cruel in moments like that. You'll be okay, I said. She smiled sadly. That sounds like something a man says when he's already leaving emotionally. Maybe. Are you? I thought about Singapore, Tokyo. The expansion deals waiting for signatures. The new projects rising overseas. And, unexpectedly, another face entered my mind. Lena Marquez, architect, Madrid. Born sharp, minded, calm. A woman I met during negotiations in Barcelona, who once spent 3 hours arguing with me about structural philosophy over wine without asking a single question about my net worth. That had interested me immediately. Yes, I admitted softly. I think I already have. Lena absorbed that quietly, then nodded once. Good. No jealousy, no accusation, just acceptance. Strangely, that hurt too. She moved toward the door slowly. Halfway there, she stopped. Victor? Yes? I really did love you. I looked at her, standing in the warm evening light of the house she once despised. And for the first time since all this began, I answered without strategy. I know, I said, she cried then. Not loudly, not dramatically, just once. Then she left, the door closed, softly behind her. And that was the end of my marriage. Not at Meridian Yard, not in court, not during the affair, here. In the quiet after truth finally arrived too late to save anything. 6 months later, I stood atop a new development site overlooking the Singapore harbor. While Lena reviewed structural plans beside me, she wore black slacks, wind-blown hair, and reading glasses she forgot to remove when concentrating. You are distracted, she said without looking up. Am I? Yes. What gives it away? You stare at cities like they owe you apologies. I laughed softly. Elena glanced sideways at me. There it is. What? The human expression, rare sighting. I looked out across the skyline steel, glass, concrete. Crane arms turning slowly against sunset. New foundations everywhere. You know, Elena said thoughtfully. Most developers think buildings are about height. And they're about weight. That struck something deep in me. She continued studying the plans. A structure only survives if the pressure underneath it is understood properly. I smiled slowly. Yes, I said. Exactly. Below us, workers moved through the skeleton of a future tower, rising floor by floor into the evening sky. Strong things take time. That was the lesson my father taught me with a brick in my trembling hands all those years ago. Pain is time. So is love. So is revenge. So is survival. And in the end, foundations always reveal themselves eventually. Usually right before everything else collapses. The end of Empire of Bricks. Thanks for listening.